Hi, I'm Jen Richardson and I'm your host today on Business Growth Academy. Can I say something that a lot of business owners do not want to hear? Cheap work is expensive, not for the customer, but for you as a business owner, because every time you undercharge to win the job or keep the client or stay competitive or avoid an awkward conversation, you actually put more pressure back on the business to somehow make the numbers work later. And later usually looks like this: more jobs, more hours, more stress, more pressure on your cash flow of the business, and more pressure on your team to create and build whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then not much else left over at the end for you as the business owner. And of course, that's the trap. A lot of people think lower prices create safety because they help you win more work. But more work at the wrong price does not create safety. It actually just creates volume. And volume without margin can wear a business out. Now, we talked about margins in last week's podcast. So if you haven't listened to that, you should go and listen to that, because there's a lot in last week's podcast about what a margin is and why it's so important. Anyway, I'm Jen Richardson from 123 Financial Group and Business Growth Academy. Now, we work with small business owners, especially tradies and service-based businesses at 123 Financial Group. So this is what we do day in, day out. Those businesses that we're working with are busy, they're capable, and they're good at what they do, but they are often carrying more financial pressure than most people realise. And it's one of the common threads that I've seen over the last few years is that business owners that usually were very calm and not stressed now are feeling very stressful. One, about the rising costs that they're getting. There's employee shortages. There's just the pressure of cash flow on them. And pricing is one of the biggest reasons that I see for that. So right now, Australian small businesses are still dealing with rising input costs. And of course, that's not getting any better given the current world situation. And of course, that means we have squeezed margins. So NAB's business survey said that purchase costs and labour costs both lifted in early 2026. And I'm sure that's not any breaking news to any of you as business owners. So this is not a mindset issue. It is a real commercial issue for all small business owners. So today I want to talk about why increasing your prices matter, why dropping prices can actually quietly damage a business, and why doing fewer jobs at the right price is often far healthier than doing more work for less reward. But I want you to stay with me through this whole podcast, because I'll give you a better way to think about pricing at the end than just what do I need to change to win the job. So let's start firstly with some uncomfortable truths, and they are uncomfortable, and it quite often goes against what we think is the right thing to do as business owners. So underpricing often feels responsible in the moment. You know, you're not getting as much work as you thought you were getting. All of a sudden, customers aren't coming in like they used to be. You might not be getting the quotes that you're putting out. And so the first gut reaction that we have is, I'll drop my pricing so I win a job. There's modelling that you can do to show that increasing your pricing actually makes it better, makes you more competitive, because when you drop your pricing, people start to look at the way your business runs differently. Because if you've got a business that's quoting, let's say, $10,000 for a job, and you quote $8,000, the first reaction people have is, great, it's much better. But then they start to question what you're not going to do, because that's a 20% decrease on your competitor. So they start to question what you're not going to do, what you're going to shortcut, why your quality isn't going to be as good as their quality. Now, if you quoted, let's say, $12,000, you've got an opportunity then to increase your margin, which gives you a better profit, but also then to say what we call USP, so unique selling proposition. So why are you better than your competitor? People buy on emotion. They don't buy on just a dollar figure. And that's a really important thing to understand when you're in business. So if you're in the trades, for example, one of the things that we hear people whinge about all the time is they didn't show up on time. They didn't communicate. They said they'd be here Monday. They didn't show up till Thursday. When they went home, the place was a mess, didn't clean up, blah, blah, blah. So find out what your USP is, so what your unique selling position is. And that could be, if we say we'll be there on a day, we will be there that day. It could be that before you send your trades home the day, that you get them to clean up the site. So when the homeowner comes home, the place is clean. It can be that we give you regular updates on where your work's up to. An example I'll use there is we just had to get one of our cars repaired. And the smash repair guys were sending us text at every stage of the process, so we knew where it was. When we dropped the car into them to be repaired, they said it's 3 weeks. More than likely we'll have it done in 2 weeks, but we like to tell you 3 so that you're not anxious for it to come back. Now, we got that car back within 2 weeks. They sent us a text to remind us that the car needed to be dropped in on Monday, 7 a.m. We're open. Drop it in whenever you get a chance. Doesn't have to be here at 7. They then, the parts have arrived. We'll start to disassemble your car. Then the next one was your car's now being put back together. It's now getting spray painted. And then we got finished being spray painted. The things are getting added back to it. We should be ready for Friday. Thursday, we got another text that said, your car should be ready by lunchtime tomorrow. That, to me, was the best service I've ever had whenever I've had to have a car put into a smash repair. Not that that's happened too often, but it was just, I wasn't wondering. My car's been in there for 2.5 weeks and I don't know whether they've even started it. And so your unique selling position could be that we keep you updated where everything is up to. And so people will pay for that. So start thinking about that when you're doing your pricing. And of course, when you're doing your pricing and you want to drop your pricing because you're not getting the work that you thought you'd get, you might tell yourself that you're being flexible or realistic or that you're customer focused. But really what you are doing is putting that doubt into your consumer's mind about, your quote came in at 10,000, now all of a sudden it's dropped to 8,000, so you've ripped me off because you could have done it for 8,000 all along. So underpricing a job just to get the job actually pushes your problem further down the line because you don't have as much money to pay those bills. And, as I said in last week's podcast, we covered off margins, and that's what we talked about. If your pricing comes down, a lot more of that pricing is taken up with your cost of goods sold, which means your margin's left less, and your margin is what pays for those costs. So a business still has to carry the same wages, if not more at the moment, materials, overheads, there's still tax to be paid, and there's still the owner, you, is income that's got to come out. So if you drop your pricing, you're dropping your revenue coming in, all those expenses aren't going away. So all you're doing is putting more pressure on that pricing. So if your pricing is too low, the pressure doesn't actually disappear. It just moves to somewhere else. So yes, you got a job, but now you're worrying about how you want to pay your bills. So when your pricing is wrong, the business actually pays for it later. So the ASB FEO, which is the Australian Small Business Family Enterprise Ombudsman, it's a really hard thing, has talked about the margin squeeze for small business, and it's been a really hot topic lately. And that's exactly what underpricing is. You are squeezing your profit margin, and then your costs take up a lot more of that, what is left over. And so that underpricing becomes really dangerous because the costs keep moving, but a lot of the pricing doesn't. And so all of a sudden, what money's coming in is a lot less to cover all of your costs. So the business owners should resist price increases. So why do we do that? So one of the biggest things that I hear when I'm talking to small business owners is they're worried that they're going to lose their customers to a competitor because a competitor is cheaper. Now, you can't control what another business does, but you can control what you do. So if you think you're going to lose a customer to a competitor because they're cheaper, they're always going to be a price-sensitive consumer. Now, unless you're selling, flour or, just a product that's exactly the same regardless of who sells it, then you've always got some sort of competitive advantage. Yes, if you go to Coles or Woolworths and they're selling the same product, same brand and everything, people are buying just on price because there is nothing to differentiate that product with. But if you're a plumber or you're a builder or a carpenter or a hairdresser or even a cafe, you have a competitive advantage over your competitors. You just need to work out what that is. So you've got to make sure that whatever you're selling or doing in your business cannot be compared like for like. Now, when you get a customer that says, I just wanted a timber veranda, so what that builder's doing and what this builder's doing is exactly the same, then you haven't, in your quote or talking to that customer, given them an opportunity to differentiate. So that's really important. I mean, and, as a consumer, and I used to be married to a builder, I know that a deck isn't a deck. There'll be some people that will put more emphasis on something. It'll be straighter, it'll be quicker, it'll be a better product, it'll look better, it'll be aesthetically more pleasing, it'll be done in a more timely manner. Everyone has a competitive advantage unless you are on selling a product. So we also price cheaply because we fear that work will dry up. And, it's interesting. I was talking to another accountant a few months ago, and he's new to business. And, I'm quite happy to coach other accountants. It doesn't bother me. And he rang and he just, I knew him through some other work that we did. And I was just chatting to him and he said to me, I haven't had a single referral for a client or new client come walking through the door asking for pricing for 8 or 9 months now. He goes, I'm really worried because there is always a natural attrition with your business. Any clients that come to my business, I don't say that they're going to be a client forever because that is never going to be the case. Circumstances will change, something they might move, they might downsize, they might upsize. But when I was chatting to him, he said what he did was one of his referral partners, he rang them and said, you're sending me the wrong type of work. They're not the clients I want. This is the client work I want. Could you just send me that? And he was starting to regret to do that because he said, now they're not sending me anyone. And that's probably because I found an accountant that wanted to take on the cheaper work that he didn't want to take on or the less profitable work. And I said to him, but isn't that a good thing? Because if you'd taken that work on and there's not a good profit margin in it, all you're doing is spending all your time on these clients that aren't going to give you the money that you need. They're always going to be price sensitive. They're not the work that you want. And while you're doing that, you're not available to work on the clients that you want to work with. So I said, stop complaining about that. Go find a better referral partner or start to market yourself. Show the difference why people should come to you, not some other accountant. And, I haven't heard back from him, so I don't know if it worked or he even took it up. But his fear was that his work was going to dry up. And so he questioned whether, one, the work he was chasing was the right type of work and should he decrease his pricing. And, just because you're an accountant doesn't mean you can look at your own business from that outside lens looking in. And so the fear that he had was he'd lost his work to the competitor, and he probably had because his referral partner just wanted somebody to refer their clients to. They didn't want to go, you're the perfect person for that. But if all the work that they were referring to him was the wrong type of work, then he had the wrong referral partner. He needed to find a referral partner that was going to send him clients of what he wanted. His fear was that his work was going to dry up. He was wondering what the future looked like. Should he close up his business and just go and work for somebody else? But there's also the fear that we have that we are greedy. And that was where I was saying earlier that if your competitors priced at 10,000 and you've priced at 8, and then, there's that fear that, well, are they being greedy because they're charging an extra $2,000? And so if we're quoting based on what we think our consumer will want, and that's it, maybe we're looking greedy, what we need to do is stop and step back and explain to the client why your price is what it is. And you should never have a fear of justifying your price. Every consumer has the right to question you about your price, and we do that in business every time. We question when a subcontractor quotes for us, we question when we're looking at materials and things like that. So you've got to remember that your consumer is going to justify or want a justification of what your pricing is. But we shouldn't veer from that, because it actually gives us an opportunity to explain and to tell those people why our pricing is what it is. So sometimes as owners, we just need to know the number, and we tell ourselves that it needs to change. But emotionally, we want to keep everything the same, because as human beings, we like that safe place to be. We don't want to have to justify. We don't want to have to explain to our clients. And, one of the guys in the office today was saying that there's been a new ruling that, that now with the fuel prices, that there can be an on-charge to the bigger corporations for the fuel costs. So we accept that. The fuel costs have gone up. The trucking companies need to get that back, because otherwise it eats into their profits and their profit margin. So we accept that, and we think that they should do it, but we don't accept it for our own business. And, from the 1st of October, we can't pass on the cost of having credit card facilities for our consumer. But we as small business owners are still going to pay that cost to the banks that we have our credit cards through. And we've had this discussion with lots of our clients, that if your consumers are paying by credit card, you can't pass it on, but that doesn't mean you can't have to absorb the cost. So you can increase your pricing, because you need to do that. Otherwise, you are subsidizing your consumer for the use of their credit card. Now, we're all there to get our clients to love us, but I don't think as a business owner you should be subsidizing that a person or another business paying by credit card wants to pay by credit card because they want the points, they want the ability to pay it 30 days later. So you as a business owner doesn't need to accept that, but you just need to be aware of your pricing. So a lot of the pricing decisions that we see people make are not based on actual financial decisions. They're based on emotional decisions, and they want to think that they're the good guy. And so we want to give it to our consumer at the least possible price. And, what we see is a lot of small business owners still charging what they were charging 2 or 3 years ago. But in that 2 or 3 years, everything's gone up, from our wages to our rents to our insurances. So we need to be very conscious that we are increasing our pricing along with what we're being charged for pricing from other businesses. So if that's you and you haven't looked at your pricing, and we always say to everybody, you should look at your pricing regularly, because small changes regularly is better than a big jump every couple of years. So NAB put out a report back in February 2026 that said that purchase cost growth had rose by 1.5% in the quarter before, and then the quarter before that. Labour costs had also gone up by 1.5%. So when owners price on the old pricing system, those costs have gone up, and of course then the squeeze becomes tighter for small business. So the myths for lower pricing that we hear all the time is lower prices can win you work, but that doesn't always mean you're winning the right work. And so that was where I was saying before that, and I talked about this in last week's podcast about the profit margins, that you are better off to work less and have a higher profit margin than work more with a low profit margin. So it's the old adage that, you've only got 24 hours in a day, how do we all spend it? But as business owners, we've only got so much work that we can do. And if you can do the same amount of work and you make more money out of it, isn't that actually better than chasing more work at a lower margin? So an example there is if you can do one job and make a profit of $5,000 in a week, or you can do 15 jobs and make $5,000 profit. Are you better off not to do one job, do it well, and make the same amount of money as doing 15 and it's making that same money? So more customers demand more, they compare more, and they also leave faster. And that's really important as a business owner, because we would like to work at any business with people that are grateful for what we do, people that understand what we do is better than what the competitor will do, people that want to refer more work to us, people that will pay on time when we send them a bill, and people that aren't cost sensitive. So if you're working with somebody that is driving down your price at the very beginning, they're not going to pay on time. They're the ones that you're going to be chasing for wages. So lower prices can also force the business into taking on a lot more work just to produce the same result. And of course, when we do that, we don't spend as much quality time on the work. We can make more mistakes. We have more people that complain. We show up late to jobs because we've got to get the last one finished. And it just opens up a can of worms of what we do as business owners, because more means more moving parts, more complexity, more fatigue, and also more room for error. So winning more jobs is not the same as building a better business. And of course, there is a big difference between being competitive and being too cheap, because a business can stay busy for years, week on week, and with weak pricing and still not build the profit that you need, the breathing room to be a business owner, to take time out of your business to work on your business. And that's really important as well. So the owner often thinks that the answer when things get tight is more volume, when the real answer is better economics. So Xero reported on Australian small business sales. So in the December quarter, the sales grew 6.7% from the previous quarter. And that sounds encouraging, but the sales growth on its own does not tell you whether the work was priced well or if there was enough profit left behind. And we talked last week about why just focusing on revenue is such a dangerous thing for a business owner to do. And that led into the margins talk. So if you are looking at your pricing and looking at your revenue as the only way of doing things, you need to stop and look at your margins. So go back and listen to last week's podcast. So why does better pricing actually give you talking points? And so I briefly touched on this earlier, that when you are giving better pricing, it gives you the opportunity to talk to your consumer about why you are better than your competitor. It also gives you less dependence on volume. So if you're not pushed, you've got more time to spend with your client, more time to talk about what needs to be done. It also gives you the ability to absorb rising costs. So we know there's a lag between when costs ride to us and when we can pass those costs on to our consumers. And by getting those better jobs at better profit margins, that gives you a better opportunity to absorb those costs till you can increase your pricing. So increasing your pricing gives you more profit potentially as a business owner, gives you the breathing room, it gives you a better cash flow, and it also gives you an ability to say no to poor fit work. So work that doesn't fit in to where you want it to fit into. A price increase is not about making more money per job. It is about giving your business room to breathe, to flexibility to what you want to do when you want to do it. And sometimes a business does not need more customers, and that's a really important thing. And, it's one of the things that the high-end businesses do. I'm in a coaching group that's a marketing coaching group because, marketing isn't my thing. And the guys that do the coaching there say, we want our clients to go after the high-end ones because it's the same amount of work to get 10 clients at $1,000 as it is to get one client at $10,000. So if you can quote and get better work, more consistent, you don't have to be constantly chasing it, you relieve yourself of a lot of pressure. The downside of getting big contracts or bigger priced revenue is that if you've got it wrong, you've got it wrong in a big way. So you've got to be very careful at your costings and you've got to be very careful with your pricing to make sure that you have covered all bases. So a small number of jobs well priced can perform a larger job if you got your pricing wrong, because if you get it wrong in one and you realise, you can quickly change with the others if you have the ability. So it's important to remember that we as small business owners employ more than 5 million people in Australia. So that's 39% of the private sector workforce. So it doesn't include government employees. So pricing is not a small decision, because if you can't keep your business running and running profitably, what happens is that then affects your hiring, and it affects your retention of your staff and the resilience. And, you know, if you can pay your staff better so that they don't leave, and look, I'm the first to say that wages aren't the only decision for employees to leave or stay. It can be conditions, it can be how they're thought about, and that's a podcast for another day. But having the right pricing allows you to pay your staff well and pay them what they should be paid. It will then give them the resilience. So when you ask them for help, they're quite happy to do it because they're paid fairly well. So what happens if you as a business owner avoid looking at your pricing for too long? Well, as we said earlier, pricing is going up, which means that your gross profit margin is shrinking, but it's shrinking quietly, which means that your cash flow gets tighter. You're struggling to make the money you used to make. And, you know, I hear that all the time with small business owners that, you know, just not making the money we used to make. The owner starts looking for savings elsewhere. You know, how do we cut costs? How do we look at, you know, what we do? Expenses become the constant problem. The team pressure rises because everyone's doing more and there's more pressure to get jobs done quicker, so you move to the next one. The business owner, of course, us, we work harder, but we still feel behind. And of course, the business becomes more fragile because one bad month or one late payout, it can cause chaos. And this is how businesses become busy, tired, and fragile. So, you know, it's really important as business owners that we look after our own business first. And this is one of the things that I always say, that, you know, it's great that we look after our businesses, but if we don't have a business, then our clients can't get looked after. So it's important that your first client you need to look after is you as a business. So when you're talking about pricing, I want you to start to think about things slightly differently. So I don't want you to start with, what can I get away with charging? Start with this. What does this business need to work to make this product or this produce or whatever it is that we do? Look at your direct costs, your overheads, the time that you spend on jobs, the complexity that you have on jobs, the risk that you have with doing more work, and of course the margins that you need to cover your fixed costs. So I want you to price for sustainability, not just for acceptance. Price for the business you have now, not the one you had before those cost changes. And that's where I said some businesses haven't changed their costs for, 1, 2, 3 years. Except that you will lose customers, because that is part of life and part of being in business. It is not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of your business. It is just the way things work in the world. But of course, losing poor fit or low value work is not a problem. Sometimes that's a lifesaver for a business. So you do not need every customer, but you do need to have the right economics. So think about this next time you're pricing a job, that more owners need permission to stop buying revenue at the cost of the profit. So if a client only wants to stay because you are the cheapest, that's not really a sustainable foundation for your growth and your business. So here's some practical things that I want you to do today, or at least in the next week. I want you to look at your current pricing against your current costs. I want you to identify the lowest margins jobs that you've got or the services that you deliver. Look at which customers create the most effort for the least return. So they're the problem children. They're the ones that we don't really want to have as customers. So I want you to check whether the business is using discounts too easily. So if somebody walks in and they say, so-and-so quoted this, can you match it? Or if I buy 2 of those, will you give me a discount? Look at those, because volume is required at the current pricing is not always what you need to keep up. So I want you to model what happens if you increase your prices and lose some work. And if you need help with that, reach out, because we've got a tool that will do that for you. It is a really difficult thing, but that's where I said sometimes doing less work at a higher price and losing some of your consumers is actually better for your profit. So compare against what a full week looks like in your margin. So go back and look at last week, look at each job. There is work involved in this, but these things come with costs. So I want you to communicate to your clients the price increases, but clearly and calmly, and don't apologize for them. Pricing reflects the real cost and the real value. So sometimes it's easier to do, as I said, less work at the right price and make smarter financial decisions. So keep in mind, prices have gone up. I've given you lots of statistics through this podcast that pricing has gone up. And so your pricing needs to go up as well. Now, if you've listened to this podcast and you're not quite sure what your next steps are, at 123 Financial Group, we always talk about the profit engine that we do. So we always talk about clarity, which is knowing what work actually costs you and what you should leave behind. Our other pillar is control. So pricing is one of the strongest levers a business has, but only if it's used intentionally. And of course, our growth thing looks at the healthy growth between profitable work, not underpriced volume work. So if you have listened to this podcast and you think you need some help with your pricing or how to be better at your business, reach out to us here at 123 Financial Group. We would love to have a chat to see if we are a good fit. And of course, if you know somebody that's in business that needs help with their pricing, I would love you to send them this podcast, because my ultimate aim is to help as many businesses as we can. So remember, pricing is not emotional. It should not be based on the fear of losing jobs or customers, and it should not be based on what your cheapest competitor is doing down the road. It should be looked at properly, because every time you hold pricing too low, the business has to make up for it somewhere else, and usually that's through more work, more pressure, or less profit for you as a business owner. As I said, here at 123 Financial Group, we do work with small business owners, especially those in the trades and service-based businesses, and we always work to help them understand their numbers, their cash flow, their pricing, how they can get growth. Business Growth Academy, which is the podcast you're listening to now, is where we want to help as many people as we can through guidance, self-confidence, and how to build a business. So if you've got something you would love me to chat about in the podcast, just drop a question below or drop something over to us and we will do it, because this podcast is about helping you as small business owners improve how you do business. So just remember, before you quote your next job or you do your pricing, look to see whether that pricing is doing what you want to do as a business owner. And make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, either where you're listening or watching to, so that you get notified when I drop the next episode, which is every week. So we've got our social channels, which is 123 Financial Group, and that's across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And then we've got the Business Growth Academy podcast. If there's anything you want help with, or you just want to ask any questions, see if we can help you with your business, we would love to have a chat. So that's all for now, and I'll see you next week.